I'm Heather James, and I am president of the SAA. There is something about being president in 2017 that makes you long for impeachment. Your own. In a normal year, as Gene Howard recently put it to me, the position of SAA president is largely ceremonial and honorific. It's your year to strut and fret, your hour on stage, and then be heard no more. At the podium today, booted from high table tomorrow, reduced to your former activities at the start of every Friday luncheon, namely anxiously surveying a sea of tables and hoping to find a seat among friends. You get a little mock ceremony, a chance to make your fellow SAA members laugh or cry or tweet, and maybe you even get a tiara. I was robbed, I tell you. Seriously, who wants to be the face of the SAA, as Roland Green once described the presidential role of our organization, in a year when even you want to shatter icons of authority whenever you see them? Wherever we look, every time we open our newspapers and computers, we see reflected back to us cynical images of power, the frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. It is true that the SAA presidents I have met are warm-hearted on balance and can smile without being villains. But still, it's just not the year you want to be the face or president of a co-op. Why lead when you can instead expose and depose outsized and presumptuous egos? Let's consider two recent examples. We are literature scholars, trained in allusion and close reading, so you've already spotted the first colossus on my mind, Ozymandias. Just 1 month ago, to my great joy, archaeologists found and pulled out yet more of the colossal body parts of Ozymandias from the mud of a working-class neighborhood of Cairo. We now have more than the vast and trunkless legs of stone that captured the imagination of Shelley in 1818, and we have more of the shattered visage with its frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. We also have portions of the bust, part of the head, and the right ear, along with the crown. So 2017 has given us this amazing find and opportunity, namely more remnants of the famed 8-meter monument to the ego of Ramses the Great and his vast temporal sway, and at the same time, enough recovered art to establish a new museum and perhaps revive the tourism industry in Egypt. Ozymandias is the gift that keeps giving. We now have more artworks that can enjoin the mighty with their illusions of empire without end to look on them and despair. And then there is Exhibit 2, William Shakespeare. Specifically, the outsized painting of him that long held pride of place in one of our more distinguished institutions, the Department of English at UPenn. There is something about this year that inflames passions against the outsized, the pig or the great or the mighty or the huge. It led the English grads at Penn to reevaluate their entire relationship with the 8x8 painting of the Bard. Whereas they used to dress him up in women's clothing and give him a bit of carnivalesque fun, they decided this year that they had had just about enough of his apparent claim to be the face of English literature. So they made off with him for a while and replaced the painting with the image of Audre Lorde before finally getting a more equitable representation of the literature we teach and study, the images of 100 and more writers. The Leviathan is an image of the many, and sometimes it is good to break it down to parts. While this story is well known from the Chronicle of Higher Education, as well as the more acerbic accounts of right-wing tabloids furious about disrespectful youth and the deposition of the Bard, I prefer the version passed down to me by my presidential buddy, the wonderful Rebecca Bushnell. In her account, the colossal painting of Shakespeare now leans comfortably against a wall in the office of the chair of the Department of English, while everyone wonders just what to do with it. It's not a good year to be huge. I personally feel that Shakespeare, if he only knew, would be breathing a long sigh of relief to discover that he is no longer the face of all writers, but instead one writer among many. He did not write to turn himself into an icon, I think, but instead to launch his own passionate interests in words, books, theater, peoples, gender and sexualities, distinctions of faith, political philosophy, and more, into an unknown future of adaptation and change. I would like to pause and make actually quite a few important announcements before I return at the end of my talk in a ring structure to some comments on what it is in my experience of this year that holds us all together in times of duress. But the first things I want to do are these. First, this year's local arrangements represent an evolving model for the SAA. No fewer than 18 institutions and 26 of our colleagues, not just in Georgia, but in the South, gave generously to host our conference. It is often the case that one especially well-endowed university supplies most of our wants, not this year. Please cast a long and appreciative glance at the list of persons and institutions that have helped bring us here today. These appear on the first 2 pages of your program. Second, I would like to thank the tiny but accomplished and miracle-working staff of the SAA, beginning with Donna Evan-Kessif, who has long helped us organize the many technical aspects of our conference. I'm also delighted to introduce Claire Mulligan, our new projects manager. Claire, are you here? Claire is working. No. She comes to us from the National Abortion Federation. She holds a BA from Washington University, where she majored in women, gender, and sexuality studies. She has also experience with Shakespeare's Globe and Wash U's Edison Theater. Please welcome her. Next, we owe a great debt of thanks to BG Beatrice Lee, who stepped up to meet an onslaught of demands that fell on her and Lena Orlin when the SAA unexpectedly lost the sole full-time staff member on the very day that seminar registrations requests were due. Are you here, Beatrice? She was. Now she's working. A PhD from NYU, Beatrice is a distinguished scholar and former professor at the National Taiwan University and the past president of the Taiwan Shakespeare.Association. Words fail me, and words fail to describe what we owe to our executive director, Lena Orlin. It is thanks to Lena that the members of the SAA are able to pursue and enjoy our wide-ranging and evolving interests in scholarship, film and performance, mentorship and outreach, and all at a bargain price. She is apparently tireless, deeply thoughtful, and universally kind, while still managing to be a killer negotiator on our behalves. I have heard in the past that Lena Orlin is the SAA, and I suspect she would not agree. It would be truer to the spirit of her leadership to say, as one SAA member remarked to me at yesterday's opening reception, that she knows everyone in the room, or aspires to. The third item on this agenda is to announce the results of the Leeds Barrel Dissertation Prize. This, as you know, involves quite a few submissions from our SAA members. It's a double-blind process, and we have this year a winner and an honorable mention. The winner of the Leeds Barrel Dissertation Prize is Rebecca Fall. You can stand, Rebecca, for the dissertation, The Nonsensical Renaissance on Not Making Sense in 17th Century England. And you heard some of that when on the Next Gen plan just yesterday. The honorable mention goes to John Kuhn, Columbia PhD, for his dissertation, Making Pagans, Theatrical Practice and Comparative Religion in Early Modern England. John wrote to me yesterday to say he's been tangled in impossible travel difficulties for the last 24 hours and is absent today because of tornadoes. A fourth announcement. One of the great research libraries in the U.S., as many of you know, is the Huntington Library of Pasadena, California, in the greater Los Angeles area. After productive talks with Steve Hindle, the Director of Research, we are delighted to announce a new and annual fellowship opportunity for SAA members, an annual SAA fellowship to be held at the Huntington Library. It is a one-month fellowship with a $3,000 stipend, with an application process to be handled by the SAA on the timeline of the Huntington Library, which you can find on their website. Steve Hindle has specifically asked me to tell you that if you want more than a month, you are always free and welcome to apply independently through the Huntington's own short-term fellowship competition. A fifth thing, we have a website. And it changes, and we never tell you when it changes. So at some point, when you're stuck in, maybe an airport with some Wi-Fi, you can look it up and browse through it to see the various things that have gone up over the last few years, and that would be informative and great, and you of course can give us feedback on what else you'd like to see there. A sixth thing, our membership has grown tremendously, and our committees and forms of engagement with our members have likewise grown. The trustees take seriously our elected duties, and yet we also are looking for ways to involve interested SAA members on a volunteer basis in the committee work that goes on in the program committee, the Next Gen Plan, the Leeds Barrel Dissertation Prize, travel grants, digital strategies, and the like. We think that we'll have an option on the registration form to indicate if you'd like to volunteer, and who knows, you might have more committee work coming near you. The luncheon. I joked earlier about scanning the tables for a spot among friends. I'd like to say a couple things now. People have got lots of ideas about where they'd like to sit, and it's terrific to have a number of competing models because, as you see, there are plenty of tables to go around. We were thinking that we would like, this is the trustees, we're considering some changes of form, including a few tables designated for interested junior and senior members of the profession for mixers and mentoring over lunch. And we can start that as soon as next year. I know that because of Facebook, there's been some tables committed to just some junior faculty, and that's also great. One thing I would suggest is don't mind finding yourself sitting between two people you haven't met. That's happened to me, and I'm still friends with one. I have no idea about the I have no idea about the other because she never, all I saw was her back. But the one I did make friends with was Michael Neal. Of course, I recognized the name, and and was also recognized the look on his face, which seemed to suggest, if you say one thing about Shakespeare, I'm out of here. So my thought at the time was, all right, let's just go to it. So what do you think, Missy Elliott or Ella, Bowie or Prince, Dupre, Piatigorsky? How about the Brass Revival Band, or is it more Zydeco? And then we had a great time, and we still send each other music. So this is my recommendation to go off script and then make a friend who, God, gives you music, right? Okay. I am almost done with the announcements. There's just one. There's been, of course, a lot of interest in live streaming, especially with plenary sessions, and that's not been practicable this year. Hugely expensive, bad production values, and who needs that? But we're doing podcasts of the 2 plenary sessions that we had today. And finally, in my return to the ring structure and a return to the position of the president of the SAA, I now am ready, able to tell you the whole of what Jean Howard actually said to me. In a normal year, she remarked, the position of SAA president is largely ceremonial and honorific, but not for you. You have to lead. At the outset of the address, I played with my mock ambitions for ceremony and honors, and now I want to talk quite seriously, if briefly, about the conditions that made it possible to lead in a year where there is so little to admire in so many in a position to lead in the world. I want to comment briefly on 2 kinds of experiences that I have found sustaining and strengthening in times of confusion and challenge. And the first are my students. They inspire me. Both my undergraduate and graduate students, along with the many graduate students and young scholars I meet at the Huntington Library, you know who you are if you're here today, Our students hear ad nauseum that humanities are dwindling in popularity and productivity, as if books and research at this moment in history have finally let us down, their roots shriveled, no more growth. My own students just don't believe it. They know the drill, major in communications, business, or engineering, and they want instead to think outside of the box. It's as if my students had been listening to the political rhetoric of the past year or more, fully understood the implicit threat to the future of their intellectual lives, although they're so often encouraged to think strictly about their financial lives, and their thought has gone something like, when they go low, we go high. They understand that they live in a time of cultural dearth and a political time of crisis, violence, and threat, and they are coming back to resistance in many forms. The one I want to single out is their conviction that they can't move forward with a handbook on the art of the deal. They absolutely require a life of the mind. They believe in the power of story, of narrative. They have no intention of entering into adulthood without poetry and narrative. As it happens, I am also sharing stories with someone closer to the end of her life, and that is my mother. She is in assisted living near me now in a lovely place with a view of the Hollywood sign, where Judy Garland used to go when she had to get away from Vincent Minnelli. One requirement is all they have: no dementia. And by wonderful coincidence, my mom has got exactly one thing going for her. She has all her marbles. But if you have all your marbles and not a structure which keeps you going, you have a problem. One of the reasons I'm an academic, a professor, do research and teaching, is that at a young age I thought this is a great vehicle. There are so many opportunities in this life to get off the train and do less and less, and in the profession we have, we can always, as we put it now, reboot, think more, get more energy from those around us. My mother, as I found when I visit her for a couple of hours quite often, that there's really only one thing that brings her entire mind and being together in ecstatic coherence. It's certainly not the TV, it's not bingo, it's reading. And it's specifically me reading to her. I started with Wind in the Willows, moved on to, I hope you like this, 1599. I asked her, she picked it. She wept for Will Kemp. She was concerned for Essex and Ireland. She was troubled by what he was doing at the same time. And she thought, well, I think that Shapiro's a little hard on Spencer. Then my mother got seriously unlucky. In my teaching, I found there were more things I had to do, and so she had to listen to whatever it is I was teaching. So she laughed her way through The Miller's Tale in Middle English, and we moved on to The Clerk's Tale, which she turned out really to enjoy. At one point she said, I don't think Griselda should promise to do that. And at another point, when the narrator says something quite snarky about men and their expectations of women as compared to what women do on a routine basis, the answer coming from the other side of the room was, can we have a sidebar on that? So, it got worse for her. I actually gave her book 5 of The Fairy Queen. and I'm really happy to say, as a report from the field, that she had a really wonderful grasp of the strange shifts in tone and emotion that run through the opening cantos. So I learned something from reading to my mother, that the times we take out, sit down, read out loud, maybe to ourselves, preferably to someone else, are pauses, they're moments of dilation, which allow us to think about stories we love but may speed read because we're planning to do them in class soon, or write an essay, write an article on them. And they also turn out to be, at a certain stage, potentially in your lives, one of the most amazing ways of communicating with others whose options are shifting. So I might have thought that I was making throughout this past year a lot of connections between the position of former librarian in her 80s and undergraduates at the age of 18, and was really struck that for particular reasons of the moment, their positions aren't entirely opposite, in that my mother is in need of narratives which can pull her together and bring out all of her amazing resources. And, that's true of our students too. They need structures which allow what they have within them to come out and be moved forward into a better future for all of us. You will probably have noticed, some of you heard, that the kind of experience I'm describing is one that Catherine Mouse talks about brilliantly in her book, Being and Having in Shakespeare. So, as with my undergraduate students, my mother is finding that entertainment and distraction are fine, but it takes narrative and engagement in that narrative to keep your sense of a visible form. That was my allusion to Antony. And I wanted to just make another, because I'm not sure I quite did this here, a real plug for reading. Where I come from, creative writing is enormously popular, and so in the face of political duress, I have heard and welcomed many statements about the need to write and tell alternate stories to the dominant ones, and I have thought, for particular reasons, that reading is incredibly revolutionary and important too. There is a second way, and I'm really at the end, there's a second way in which I have learned how identity may hold together in times of stress and threat, and this brings me back fully to the SAA and my experiences with people since the executive orders have come out. We have, as an organization, had more outreach and communication with many people in a lot of venues. I have found by inviting people to respond that I've heard from quite a few people on many topics. I was going to thank more people personally by name, but it turns out that the receptionist didn't give me my last sheet of paper. So I'm going to have to thank some people separately in an email. One very substantial form of communication, which I found very gratifying, came from people who know very well that they are themselves vulnerable and potentially marginalized, and that the threats can come to them at any moment, and they're not quite sure how to protect themselves except in a larger community. What's really striking is no one speaks solely about themselves. The first thing you do is make an analogy with other people. I'd particularly like to thank Hamid Arvas and Vin Nardisi for writing to me on these topics. Another very strong voice which emerged from the solicitation of comments from SAA members came from our many, many members who teach at non-R1 universities, people who teach at state colleges and universities, small liberal arts colleges, which often serve largely minority populations. And these include Jonathan Burton, who wrote to me earlier, and Katie Steele Brokaw has also talked to me about the priorities of teaching in an environment when our classrooms are not going to be, our politics and politicizing, always such an interesting phenomenon to talk about, right? Politics have come right into our lives. I think most of us feel that certain forms of politics have moved right into our, living spaces and our minds, and it's hard to get them out of our minds. The classroom is, by definition, more political than it used to be because our students don't have exactly the same privileges and expectations that they had some time ago, not a short time ago. And I think we do need to spend more time thinking about ourselves as scholar teachers and opening up more connections between research universities and then the R1 universities, and make that a great source of strength for the entire SAA. I'm now really pleased to say that at this very moment, the president of the Shakespeare.Association is sitting here at this table before us. This is Wendy Wall. I would like us to welcome her to the podium as the new president of the Shakespeare Association.